Okay, so in this video, we're going to work a little more with functions, cleaning up our blueprints. The main thing we're going to work towards is adding this mechanic where when we're hit by one of our enemy AIs, we want to reduce the score by 1 or some other variable that we think is more important. But for now, we'll do 1 and then have that reflected on the heads-up display. And as a function of this, we're going to do some cleanup of our character blueprint, where we're handling a lot of this logic. And I think it makes sense to continue to do that. And just so you're reminded of what that looks like. So we have right now we have our wonderful player character. It's represented by this capsule. And when they overlap this taco cube, and that cube, just so you know, has a collision preset that I think is set to overlap all. Remember, we dealt with that earlier in terms of making sure we were getting the right kind of collision message back from the system. And that cube has this tag that's food. Then we go ahead and we add 1 to the score variable in our player state, and then reflect that in the heads-up display, and it's in the player state as well. And so what I want to do the exact same thing when it comes to our enemy AI. So when our enemy AI touches the player, I then want to go ahead and take the value of player health. It's in the player state, and I want to decrease that by 1, and then have that show up reflected by taking out one of our hearts. So it should, by decreasing that, then it would now be equal to 2, which means we should only show 2 hearts on the screen. And in the process of doing that, I'm going to introduce you guys to another kind of flow control feature. It's called switch. And the switch node, something that's used, actually switch is an operator in quite a few programming languages that pretty much works like this. So if we want to say we have some variable of interest here, and here's my node, and this is our switch node, and you switch on something, and something is coming in here. So switch on, maybe in our case it's a name, and that name would represent the tag, like food, whatever you pass to it, enemy, like treasure, whatever you want. And switching on that, then there would be a number of outputs depending on what it's called. So if the name that you pass in is food, then it goes off and it can do something related to that. If the name you passed in is enemy, then it can go do something else, and treasure can, your wildest dreams can come true. So that's how the switch function is going to work, and we're going to use that to add infinite possibilities to some of the interactivity that we want in our game, but also to just kind of clean up some of the work we did way back when we implemented our scoring system. So let's go ahead and go in here. The first thing I'm going to do is take out our scaredy dude here, because we don't want him getting in our way. We're going to want to add the baddest dude in, because he's the one that's going to help us test. Right, but the majority of the work we're going to do is inside the player character. So open up the player character again, and recall what we had done here. So when we collide with food, this is the begin overlap. So this part is what's handling increasing our score. When we collide with food, increase our score and destroy the food and slow down the player. There's a lot of ands in there, and a lot of commas. And so whenever you have a comment that's doing many of these things, it's like you might want to think about how we could break this up so that it could be used in many different places, not just here. Because again, you don't want to recreate work for yourself. And this is a long blueprint, and it's doing many things, and it got it all done. But what I want to do is give you this a couple of things in your tool set to be able to break these up into their kind of natural parts so that they can be reused. And we don't want to redo any of our work over and over again. So let's start by just taking things like set current walk speed keyboard. Let's take these. This is our keyboard movement, and this is like some of our begin play activities, and move them out of the way because what we want to work on is right in here, actor begin overlap. So I'm going to disconnect these. Okay. I'm going to move this overlap up here. So recall I said we were going to work with the switch node, and that's what we're going to do. So if we drag off this and we type switch, spell it correctly, switch, and there's lots of different things. You can switch on many different things. Int, string. We want to switch on name because that's that name. So we're going to look to tags, right? So we're going to pass in different tags in here, and that's what's going to cause our switch to function. So if we click on add pin here, and you make sure you have switch selected, you have case _0. That case is not going to be case 0, it's going to be food. And then we can add a second one for enemy. Okay, and now we need to pass in here, we need to pass in a tag. And we can get the tag because we're going to get the actor that the player is colliding with. So if we just drag off this and type tag, you can get tags, and it's a variable, right? So, so it's going to have, it's a list of things. So I'm going to get a reference to the first index, which is the index 0 index, which would be the first tag, and I'll pass that in. So what this means is we can only have one tag for now on our actors. And if we have more than one tag, we may need to do some work here to figure out, how might we want to switch on it. But for now, let's just take the first one, and we're going to get that. We're going to pass it in, and if it's food exactly, we're going to print a string. And that string is going to say yum. Otherwise, this is default, right? So if it doesn't find anything, there's also the ability to just have a default output. And we'll use this as our debug to make sure that the switch is actually firing at all. And for the switch to fire, it needs to overlap with something. So remember, if you recall, we ran into some problems early on with overlaps, and that generally has to do with the wrong collision settings. So we'll say I didn't find an appropriate tag. Okay, that'll be fine for now. Let's compile that, run it, and let's go over and, let me take this guy out because he's going to just annoy us. And I'll play, should have really moved my player start closer, run over it, got it, okay, and it's yum. But remember, we disconnected the other logic that was handling the increased score and destroying the actor, but we are getting that overlap, and we are getting the switch to work, which is great. So instead of just saying yum, we want to do all this stuff here. But I don't want to add this and then keep it there, because then we're going to have all these other things like enemy, and you have a huge thing, it's impossible to read. I want to introduce you guys to functions. We've made these before, they've been made for us, but now we're going to make them in a deliberate way to make our lives easier, and those are the people that we're working with. So if you go to functions, click on function to create one, and let's name this function eat food. And so eat food, and eat food can print out the word yum. Great. And so compile that, go back here, go to your event graph, and instead of calling this print string, we can now call our function eat food. And if this works, play this out, we should get the same result. And we do, yum. Right, cool. So now we've taken this and we've put it into new function. It does nothing. Well, it prints out the word yum. Our goal quite quickly, as quick as possible, is to take what we had done here and to get it out of our lives in the event graph and get it into its own function. And then as some follow-up for you, I'm going to ask you break this down even more so that you create another function that you can just call, and then that'll make your lives even easier. But for now, we should just get this out. So this actor has tag, and this branch we no longer need because we're using the switch. But if we were to move it over, we definitely need some things because we're pushing in these object references. And the object reference came from here, this other actor. So in our function, we need to add an input. So you can have this selected and you can do that there, or you can actually come into the function and then with the function selected, you just want to say plus to new input. So that parameter that we want to pass in is going to be called food. We can call it food reference, you can call it actor, whatever you want. And it is of type actor. So we want a reference to actor and then compile it. Good. And now if we look here in the event graph, we now see that we have this food reference that we can pass in. And that food reference is just going to be our other actor, right? So it's what we ran into, it's what we collided with. And I'm just going to make it somewhat clean. Okay, I can live with that. Excellent. Compile that. And now for this stuff, just select all of it and cut it out and go here and paste it. Okay, take this yum out, and then let's go ahead and plug things in. So this food reference will be here, and then we can start executing the function. It does all this stuff, and then it destroys the actor, and the function's over. You can probably tell if I were to ask you to if I were to say to you, refactor this, make it into, make it more encapsulated, that you would want to take basically this score piece here would be one function. Maybe that's eat food or increase score, not eat food. So you can do other things to increase the player's score. And then the second function would be having to do with this, like reducing the player's walking speed, so reduce walking speed. So that would be how I would go about refactoring this code. But for now, since we've moved this in here, let's go ahead and we can delete that and play it. We should be back where we started. And we are 1, and we can't move anymore because we still have that calorie variable. Okay, so what have we learned so far? Well, we've at least learned how to make a function and call that function within our blueprint. Our event graph now looks like it was looking bad. Now it looks like this. And we've got a framework here to be able to build upon. And what I want to start now is we need a new function. And let's do, I don't know what to name it. Get hurt, eat food, be hurt, get hurt. Okay, so this function, let's just go ahead and make sure. Again, we want to make sure that this is, ouch, this is getting called appropriately. So this function, let's just clean things up there. Okay, so we would be passing in a tag of enemy, and then we can call get hurt here. Right, and for now I can't think of any other thing that we would want to pass in. Actually, we do want to pass in the enemy, so let's go ahead and add that. Great. Wow, that moved it all over there. Okay, great. So we'll pass in an enemy, and I just added another input there. Okay, if we look at that function, we're just going to print out a message. Good. And so the next thing I want to do is back in my player character, I guess baddest dude, we can add a tag to him that says he is an enemy. And so I have already expanded my my actor subheading here, which is where we're going to add tags. They should really put this somewhere easier to get to. I think I know why they don't, which is that there's gameplay tag and then there's tags. And gameplay tag is, I think, something they're moving towards in the engine. It has hierarchies built within it. It's not just single level stuff like this, but we definitely can use it. So enemy, compile that. So now this has that tag of enemy on it. And we're going to go ahead and drag him into the world. We'll play. And if we get that overlap message, we should see something on our screen. And we don't. Right? Why? Well, 9 times out of 10, when it has to do with overlap messages, it has something to do with collision, the collision settings. So if we go into baddest dude and we look at this, so here's what's happening. We do have a collider. It's set to block all dynamic, so that's a problem immediately. And then we also have this little nose here. It's also set to block dynamic, and the nose is what's going to hit the player. And so these collision presets are wrong. I'm going to select this one, this cube. Instead of block all dynamic, I'm going to overlap all dynamic, and that will then generate overlap events when it overlaps. So if we play this, we should get our message. Yes, we got it. Ouch. Cool. Okay. Great. So we actually have this function working. We know it's working. It's like a nice little place for us to work. Super simple. So in the future, definitely recommend, if you know, building out your logic like that instead of just having massive blueprints. So let's think about what we are going to do. So when this happens, we want to reduce the score by 1, right? Makes a lot of sense. So how do we do that? Well, if you recall, we can get the player character. Player character. We need to get to our player state, right? Player state. But then that's not the right player state, right? Because if we're looking for health, we don't have it. So we need to cast to BP underscore player state. Okay, that's the object we pass, and we're good. And then as BP player state, let's get health, get player health. And let's just print that out so we can say, hey, like, you're hit, that's your health. That's great. And then go ahead and play. So we should get 3, right? 3. And we do. Okay, so we know that that is working. Easy, easy. But that's not what we want. We want to reduce it. So if we do negative, negative, I guess in this case, this particular node will decrement the integer, will reduce the integer by 1. So this is a very specific type of node, and this doesn't give us the capabilities here within this getHurt function to do anything other than just when you call it, it's going to reduce the score by 1. But you could add you can add more to it, and the main thing is just for us to see the score get reduced by 1. And then we should maybe still print out this ouch for now, just because. Okay, so if I play this, we have 3 hearts. What do you think is going to happen? I don't know. It reduced it. That was cool. Okay. And then if he sees us again, I got to get in his view. But wait. There. He lost me. He sees me. That's weird. Okay. 1. Reduced. Okay. Yeah, this AI is kind of stupid. Let's see. He doesn't see us. Yeah, very weird. Okay, and then he picks us up. And then our health is gone. Okay. So we have some quite weird AI stuff going on. So that was it for this video that I wanted to show you guys. And then I'm going to take a look at this this AI and see, is there something that, because I don't think there's anything we did specifically to mess with it other than this overlap all dynamic could be impacting it. So I mean, I'll keep the tape rolling, if you will, for a second and see if I can maybe do a little bit of simulate here and see some of its AI behavior. It might have to do with perception. So if we possess, let's see if like particular thing is happening here. Yeah. So if I pause this, I need its behavior tree. It doesn't have one, right? Because we're just using perception. So still in that range. Let's see. Very weird. I mean, it can. Let's just make sure if I lose him, he stops. If I get back, then he starts. Yeah, so it has something to do with him touching me and then not losing perception, right? So I think that's what's happening here, which is to be expected, honestly. So like I need to move out of its range here, although it's quite a large range. Then it will kind of reset itself and then come towards me, and ouch. Okay, very cool. So that's behaving actually as we programmed it for this. Now we were using our really simple AI too. So we've done it. Meaning we've cleaned up our some of our logic, especially the stuff in our player character, and given ourselves a nice, very nice framework for building in some more advanced gameplay functionality that we may or may not need, but definitely we now have the option. We also finished our function to get hurt. I don't know if we necessarily needed to pass this enemy as an input, but it's not a bad thing to have. So we cleaned this up. And in the next video, what I'd like to do is, I think we've got enough. In fact, I know we have enough kind of frameworks already to, rather than jump in and start doing the really, really fun stuff, which is all around like sound design and 3D modeling and building out the world and some level design, let's set up our user interface. And that user interface is going to include things like, the start screen and the menu, the options screen and the pause screen and the game over screen and all those other kind of screens that we know we're going to want to show to the player, so that we have those frameworks also built. And then once that's done, then we'll do things like sound design and animation, and kind of start to go more into the creative depths of what the engine is able to do. Thanks.